Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Clara and today I am going to tackle my very first video request. And I honestly feel so special that some of you out there have actually asked me to produce content for you. So thank you so much for the support. Today's video is all about my top 10 favorite anthurium. And this was actually a really difficult ask, because if you haven't been able to tell in any of my previous videos so far, I gotta say that I do confess anthurium take up the majority of the collection. I mean, I still love and have several monstera types, philodendron, and a couple scindapsus. But once I fell down that anthurium hole, I fell really hard. And I know that I'm not the only one. I've heard other YouTubers talk about this and say that anthurium just kind of don't really do it for them, and that they would be surprised if many people did like anthurium the way that people like monstera and philodendron. But as somebody who absolutely likes anthurium just as much, if not more, I just can't wrap my head around that concept. I think that anthurium are so incredibly special. You have so much variation within the genus, from different types, completely different characteristics. I mean, such a spectrum of traits. And I think that the fun thing about anthurium is how easy they are to cross and hybridize. You don't have to have a nursery. You don't have to have a degree. If you've got two anthurium that are flowering at the right stages, you can produce your own hybrid. And I think that has offered a lot of fun in the hobby and a lot of newness and freshness. I think many of us who started our hobby around 2020, or maybe right before or maybe right after, we've come to a point where it's almost like we've seen it all, just except for the new things that are coming out of like Thailand and the new products of tissue culture. But with anthurium, that never feels like the case, because there's always something new. There's always somebody's new cross or a new hybrid or a mutation that's occurred from a pollination. And even if you have a cross that was done by somebody that yielded 100 different seedlings, you've got some really differing characteristics even within the batch. So I think with anthurium collecting, you've really found a niche for owning unique plants. Something that maybe not everyone has, unless they've bought a cutting of your plant. You know, you may be the only one. And so I think that's really fun, and maybe that's part of the reason I do have so many anthurium now. And so to try and narrow down from my collection, I don't know how many I own anthurium-wise. I know that plants-wise, I'm over 200. I don't know how many of those are anthurium, but just to narrow down my favorites into a top 10, and then to rate those favorites, 10 being at the bottom and 1 being at the top, was actually quite a challenge. So thank you, Caitlin, for submitting this video request. And without any more gab, I'm going to get into it. Coming in at number 10, and let me just say, number 10 doesn't mean I dislike the plant. These are the top of the top. But number 10 is my anthurium Spider Bessier by BVEP. So here is the plant, and she is just absolutely gorgeous. She's got a beautiful, dark, pillowy texture, very exceptional vein structure as well. I also like the leaf shape. This is the newest leaf, and something has happened here. I think that while the leaf was still soft, it may have rubbed up against this neighboring leaf, causing a little bit of damage there. Previous leaves, just really beautiful. The veins are minimal and the leaf is so dark. And what I love about this plant is just, I don't know, I think the combination of the shape and the veins are really nice. You can definitely see a lot of the BVEP parent, Black Velvet Eastern Panama. Also now it's called Anatolaki. And I can't say that I can see the Bessier in this, but if you know your anthurium hybrids, Bessier just makes really great kids. And so this is just a beautiful plant. It's always grown well for me, so it's not like there's any animosity between us. It's just a all-around great plant for number 10 in my top 10 favorite anthurium. Coming in at number 9 is a really beautiful glow up story. This is R.G. Dressleri by Carla Blackier Amanda. I don't know why that particular parent plant had the nickname of Amanda. Surely it was just to identify it from others of the same batch. But it has yielded just such a beautiful offspring. And I love this plant, and it's special to me because it was something that I saw a photo of somebody's mother plant, and I really fell in love with it. They had a small offset for sale, but I wasn't able to afford it at the time. But I reached back out to the seller later just to see if they had any more, and they did. It was a very small plant when I purchased it. It did not have the traits of the mother plant quite yet, and it really was just a waiting game for this plant to mature and start looking like the one I saw online. And with the latest leaves, they weren't looking bad. They had a nice shape and good veins, but they weren't quite as dark as the mother plant. Ella, psst. And they had also suffered some sort of damage, likely from pests, as I've been dealing with an onslaught of pests this winter. And I just, I wasn't loving the appearance of this, but the latest leaf that it's put out is significantly bigger than the last one, and it's significantly darker. It's almost got a blue undertone, beautiful sheen of the velvet there. And I really like the shape of this one, how it comes to a beautiful taper here at the bottom. This plant is also flowering for me now, and this will be the second time it's flowered. I did pollinate its very first flower with pollen from my anthurium papillilatimum, and I was able to sell the whole batch of seeds just because I didn't have the room to grow them out. So this has just been a great plant for me, and I've loved the journey of obtaining the plant, getting it small, watching it grow, and it's definitely a very satisfying thing to look at now. Anthurium number 8 is a plant that you have recently seen, especially if you've just seen my variegated plant haul that I uploaded like 2 weeks ago. But this is my blister variegated crystallinum. And I won't go on and on about the plant, even though it does have a number 8 spot, just because I've very recently talked to you about it. Stunning variegation. I love the blister variegation in that you're not getting a different color, but you're getting all the sparkle. And this is the newest leaf that's not yet hardened down to green. It's still got a little bit of the red undertone. And I'm so pleased with how much variegation this leaf has, because the first one that grew in my care didn't have that much variegation. And this was the leaf that sold me on the plant that I fell in love with. So I'm just very happy that it's doing well. I think it's a unique specimen. It's not often that you'll find a blister variegated anthurium where the blister variegation has not mutated the shape of the leaf. Quite often that'll happen up here around the sinus area. I've seen a lot of blister variegated anthurium that have no sinus at all, and it almost looks as if the leaf itself has melted in some way. And I know that that is a side effect of the blister variegation. And I think I've seen some like that that look nice. I even have one that kind of has that problem, and I think it looks nice that way. But this one, I think, was very unique in that the blister variegation doesn't alter the leaf form at all. And such a special plant, definitely a showstopper in the collection. And it is putting on size, and I've just repotted it 2 days ago. So I'm hoping that here in a few months, I'll be able to maybe even take a few propagations of it and share the love. In the number 7 spot of my top 10 favorite anthurium is this odd little Zara Michelle by Doc Block. And when I was writing my list, I caught myself describing this as a mutated plant. And upon further reflection, I think that that may be accurate. Now, I didn't buy this plant as a mutated plant. In fact, the backstory, and I guess I can reiterate this, it's been since my 2024 plant tour that I showed you this plant. I bought it as a large and healthy established plant. It did well in my care, and maybe a little bit too well, that I got overconfident. And when people saw photos of it and asked for cuttings, I said, hey, why not? And I think I went a little too chop heavy, and the plant that I was left with died and died and died, and it was like a 6 plus month rehab process until the chunk that's planted in here finally started to produce leaves. The last leaf that the mother plant produced before I cut it all up to bits was a little different looking. It was a little bit weird, and you always kind of wonder, oh no, is this pest damage or is this some kind of weird spontaneous mutation? And I'll try my best to locate a picture and to put it up on the screen. It just kind of had more of a tail. It was much more tapered than the previous leaves on the plant, and the veins were so heavily frosted. They were super thick bleeding veins that the plant did not necessarily have before in my care. And I'm really happy that since bouncing back, it has continued to be a little weird. I mean, if you look at the vein structure on this, which is currently its largest leaf, that's a little weird, right? And it's actually really cool. It does have a little bit of that odd shape, although it is kind of hard to show that. Perhaps if I put my hand in front of it. A little more tapered at the bottom than you might expect. This leaf here looks pretty typical. I think it's just a beautiful leaf. But the newest leaf that's currently on its way out is also another, it's kind of weird. I'll try to hold it up. And if you see anything crawling around, those are actually beneficial insects. But one half of the leaf is smaller than the other. And then this half also kind of has a little bit of a wavy edge. And the veins, there's so much sparkle. I don't think I'd call this blister variegation, but it just seems like the veins themselves are bleeding out of where they should be. Let me try and hold that up again. It's really hard to appreciate with this leaf being so new and not quite hardened off yet, but I like this plant for very many reasons. One of them was the comeback story, and the other one is it's just got all around good traits. It's got great color, great veins, great leaf shape, and the fact that it's doing weird things now, I actually really like. I love things that don't look quite like they're supposed to, and it's not because they're ill. They are just unique and they've kind of done their own thing. And you may or may not see that trend continue as we move higher up the list on my favorite anthurium. Coming in at number 6 is actually 2 plants that used to be 1 plant. I cut it in half. Now I have 2 genetically identical plants, and I'll tell you why as I continue to share, but let me just grab the better looking of the 2. This is my anthurium Carla Blackier by BVEP, Black Velvet Eastern Panama Anatolaki. I think you know the one I'm talking about. And she has been a top favorite for quite a long time. This was one of those impulse, on a whim, online purchases. Somebody was just clearing out their collection and they had posted this for sale. It was quite a long time ago and the plant was quite young, but it already had great characteristics as far as I could tell. By the time I saw the sales post, there were already 5 or so comments of people just oohing and awing and saying things like, I wish I had the money right now. And I didn't necessarily have the money right now, but I was able to purchase this plant. And I am so glad that I did, because not like this is the most important thing, but after I purchased the plant, after my comment that said sold, there were like 10 other people saying sold next, next in line, next in line. And it just kind of assured me that was a good snag, because this was a great plant at a good price for the time. And every time I've posted it on Instagram or Facebook, I always get so many comments complimenting this plant, asking if I have any propagations, people wanting clones of this. Now, it has seen better days. I think that on camera, this leaf is looking exceptional, but in real life, there is just a little bit of pest damage, and I'll be honest, I think I do see a few scale on it right now, which is a pest I've been battling for a few months. But because this plant was so highly requested out of my collection, I'd say about 6 months ago, I actually took the top cutting off of this plant, and you can see right there where an entire section was removed. And I had determined to root the top cutting and auction it off for a little bit of cash. But the longer that that top cutting stayed in my care as I was waiting for it to root enough to be ready for a sale, I just couldn't find it in me to let go of that plant. And then I had an idea that if I had 2 of this now, and if they both flowered at the same time, I was in pretty good shape to attempt a self-pollination. And self-pollination with anthurium, at least in my case, has been a really rare opportunity because you have to have 2 flowers at the same time, and most of my plants will just do 1 at a time. So by having a completely separate and established copy of this, I knew my chances were pretty decent that I would get 2 flowers at the same time. And I'm really pleased to say, and I should probably just grab it, shouldn't I? So here's the top cutting, and you can see it really is not looking as great as the bottom. I think what I'm showing you are the 2 newest leaves on each, but they both do have flowers at the same time. Now I have to be honest, and I have to tell you that it did not turn out to be the romance I had thought, because the timing was just ever so slightly off. This half was the one that flowered first and was first to female phase. And I was hoping that this one would become receptive at just about the time this one began to produce pollen. However, they both really took their sweet time, and this first one to flower became receptive, and then this one became receptive about 2 days later. So I knew my timing was just not going to be right. But then I remembered that in the freezer I had stored pollen from when this plant first flowered 7 months ago before I cut the top off. And you guys, I did try it. I applied the frozen pollen to the flower of this bottom half since it is the more well-rooted and established plant. It's still quite too early to tell. This flower was only just pollinated, I want to say 3 days ago, maybe 4, and is only just beginning to produce pollen. So although there's no way to be sure at this moment, I don't know. I'm just kind of hoping and praying that it was successful, because with so many people loving this plant, I would never be able to fulfill everybody's request for a cutting. But if I self-pollinate this successfully and it yields 100 seedlings, even though those seedlings won't be genetic clones of this mother plant, a selfing is pretty close. And I think a lot of people would be really pleased to have a self-pollinated seedling from this plant. So this is number 6 in my top 10 favorite anthurium. I interrupt this video to confess I have lost the footage of myself introducing number 5. So I'm just gonna let you jump right in to the footage I do have, but I just wanted to pop on and say number 5 is the King of Clarinervium, and it's a clone. But it was quite small when I got it. Maybe it looked approximately like this. It definitely didn't look like the clone because it was young, but he was a very trusted seller, and the price indicated that it was the real deal. And I'm just so happy that after just a couple months in my care, you can kind of see the progression from this to this to this, and this is the newest one. And I had sent photos to somebody recently who was interested, and I said, I do have one. Here's a photo. I can provide proof of purchase. She said, no need. The veins tell me it's the real thing. And I think she said that spot on, because you can tell this really is the original King of Clarinervium, not one of the knockoffs. And I want to inject here that sometimes it doesn't matter whether or not you have a clone or whether or not you have a similar looking plant. It just depends on what you are satisfied with. And there are plenty of plants out there that I think are beautiful, and I would be happy with something that looked similar. But there are a select few plants out there I want the exact thing because I'm in love with every single detail. And this was one of them. So I don't want you to feel badly. If you do happen to own a self seedling of King Clarinervium, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And if you are happy with your plant, then I am happy for you genuinely. But for me, I didn't want something similar. I did want something exact. If this is the first time you've ever learned that, and if you thought you had the original and maybe you're disappointed to learn you don't, and then you glance at your plant and you realize whether or not it's this or something else, but you realize, that's not quite what I was looking for, I would encourage you to adjust your search and specifically look for a clone. Sometimes people call it a clone, offset, division, cutting. That just means propagation of, and the exact same. So this is number 5. I'm so happy to have this plant, King of Clarinervium clone. All right, you guys, I've got a controversial plant for number 4, and it's only controversial if you care. I don't care, but I know that others would not like me to tell you that this is my anthurium Carlablackiae. And I've spoken about this in my plant tour video, but this takes the spot of number 4 on my top 10 favorites because look at it. It is so pretty, the veins, and it's even got this like wavy edge that it's held on to. Even some of the older leaves, even though they're not looking great now, they also had a wavy edge. The reason I say that this is controversial is because a lot of people might look at high-end plants similarly to how non-plant people might look at a designer bag. And if you pay a price for the designer bag, but you can't really prove it was designer, people are going to question you. People are going to think it's not the real thing. And it almost loses its value, or so I understand, because I'm not a designer bag person. But with Anthurium Carlablackiae, I think in the anthurium world over the past 18 months, it has gained such a height of popularity, and it is an expensive one. If you find one that's nice, they're pretty pricey. And people who have paid a lot of money for a genuine Anthurium Carlablackiae, I'm not going to say everybody falls into this category, but I think many feel almost some kind of status that they have that plant. I mean, it's a nice plant. It is something to brag about. And unfortunately, some of those people then almost attack anybody who has anything less than that label on their plant. Now, the story behind my plant is there was a batch of seedlings that came from an Anthurium Carlablackiae. The pollen parent, the other parent, was an Anthurium Carlablackiae also. So when you take a Carla and you pollinate it with a Carla, the offspring will be pure Carla. But the story I was told was that the person who harvested those seeds had a momentary lapse. Maybe they weren't paying attention, but as they were writing the label for the entire seed batch, they accidentally wrote Carlablackiae by Papillilaminum. And I can totally see that happening, especially with a grower who is creating hundreds of crosses, has so many mother plants, just slipped and wrote the wrong thing. But after that was introduced a question. Is it crossed with Papillilaminum or is it pure? And unfortunately for that seller, he was not able to sell them as pure Carlablackiae anymore because at a time the label did not say that they were pure, and the only thing you could go off of was his memory or his word. And for many people, that's not enough. And especially I could see that being true if you've paid a high dollar for a plant. You want to know it is what it's supposed to be. But when this was offered for sale as a very small seedling, with the disclaimer that it could be crossed with Papillilaminum, because the seller thinks he wrote the wrong thing on the tag, but it also could be pure. I took a look at the traits and I took a look at the price and I said, I'll buy it because that's Carlablackiae enough for me. And as it's matured, I'm so happy to tell you that everything points to pure Carla Blackier. You look at the leaf, you look at the petioles. I don't have a flower on it now, but the flower is distinctly a Carla Blackier flower. So I think at this point in its maturity, I can confidently say that this is a Carla Blackier. But for a while, there was a time where it was almost not allowed for me to say that on the internet. I couldn't quite say it was pure Carla if there was any doubt. Like I said, it's not controversial to me because I have no doubts. I mean, look at this. This is not crossed with Papillilanimum. And it wasn't one of those cases where it could have been crossed with something else. It was either pure Carla or it was crossed with Papillilanimum. And over time, this plant has reached maturity and shown me her true colors. Besides all of that drama, besides it, and I'm really not a person who cares, but I do feel the need to explain it because there are people who are very passionate about meticulous labeling, and you kind of have to live by the label. And some of you may be watching this video, and I'm not trying to shame you or make you feel bad. I'm just expressing that I'm not that way. But for those of you who find it very important, I did want to be honest about the history of this plant, that it was not sold to me as pure. It was sold to me with a question mark. But because I don't really care about that kind of stuff, and I just love a plant by its traits. Look at that. That is so beautiful. I think the wavy edges are my favorite. I really couldn't tell you if that's an environmental thing, if these leaves just hardened off while they were like laying up against a different leaf and that's why they look like that, or if it's a genetic thing. I would kind of think that that's just the way the plant is because the other leaves have the same waves. So it's just a beautiful, beautiful plant to me, coming in at number 4. Number 3 is a big one, and it's not my biggest one. I should say now, my biggest plant, although it is so dear to my heart, is not a favorite. It's not even on this list, but would you like to just take a peek really quick? Up here is my biggest anthurium, and the scale where my camera is angled and where my head is not doing justice. I may just insert a photo for fun of how massive this plant is. She almost made it onto the top 10, but I had to be completely honest with myself. I like other plants better. But honorable mention, biggest anthurium. I haven't even told you what it was. It's my Magnificum by Warwickwianum, but let me get what I was going to get, which is spot number 3 on the list. I'm not sure what leaf to hold up first. This is the biggest leaf on this dock block by Luxurians. And it's so thick. Did you hear it just kind of pop? It's almost like cardboard. Do you hear that? But this is the newest leaf if I spin it around this way, and I think that this one has even much better of a color. It has, I'm sorry, I'm knocking things on the shelves here. This leaf has held on to just a little bit of a purpley red, bluish undertone. I love this plant. It is really exceptional. And unfortunately, I just don't know if I'm quite doing it justice here on camera. It definitely looks black and it definitely looks minimal, but you can't quite appreciate the texture of this plant. I'm sure that you can imagine it if you know what an Anthurium luxurians looks like. This is a little bit less textured than Anthurium luxurians, and it has like a sub-velvet kind of sheen to it. One thing I do absolutely love about this plant is the color change that happens on the emergent leaves. They go from like purple to red to pink to magenta, finally hardening down to this super dark, deep bluish green. And I almost feel bad that I don't have too much more to say about something that's at a number 3 spot, but it's a beautiful plant. It's a favorite, and I got it for free. That's not really why it's a favorite. It was just a freebie with a seedling purchase, and I've had it for a very long time, and it's something I truly love. Let me show you the biggest leaf again, since it's over here knocking into other things. And I'll put it right up beside my head so that you've got a good scale. It's really nice. It's really nice. So this is my dock block by Luxurians. This list so far has all been the good stuff. So I hesitate to tell you that we're getting into the good stuff now, but we're at number 2 on the list. And this is one I've always heard great feedback from. I'm sure you guys are gonna love it. Mutated King of Clarinervium. What is this? This is probably the most unique looking thing I've shown you today. This looks nothing like anything else, and that is why I love it so much. We talked just a little bit ago about King of Clarinervium specifically. There's the original clone, and then it was self-pollinated, and it's probably been self-pollinated hundreds of times to kind of fulfill the demand for the plant. Sometimes though, and this happens with self-pollination or with cross-pollination, you get a weirdo. Something that turns out completely unlike what was expected. And that's what's happened here. And it was sold to me looking like this, and that is exactly why I bought it, as a mutated seedling produced from a self-pollination of King of Clarinervium. And I don't really think I need to describe it to you because you can see it. And you can see how magnificent it is. Of course, I know, I'm sorry to offend you with my little crispy tips, but these were the import leaves, okay? These leaves came with the plant. Dare I say maybe even this one came with the plant, and I only have one new one in my care. I also don't know the word for this. I think that this looks similar to chlorosis, which has something to do with the chlorophyll, kind of where you can see the different cells of the leaves. But every single leaf of this plant looks like that. So I don't know if that's chlorosis or if that's just like how it looks. Let me see if I can show you it on the back of the leaves too. No, you can't see it, but with my light source coming through, to me, I can see it really well. It's just such a standout plant. It's like the Warwickwianum version of a Clarinervium. Do you see it? And such a weird flat sinus. I mean, it's so weird. And I think after I purchased this plant is when I really fell in love with the oddballs. And I don't really have very many other weirdos like this, but I'm definitely on the lookout. If I see an anthurium that looks nothing like it's supposed to, I'm obsessed. So this is number 2, mutated King of Clarinervium, and I'm happy to say that I've already started sharing this plant. I was able to take 2 cuttings of it maybe 2 months ago. They are both going to their new homes tomorrow. Ship them out. So I hope that you guys appreciate this plant as much as I and others do. And I hope you can see why this is in the number 2 spot. It is so cool. Now, last but not least, in fact, the least of the least, I don't think you'll be disappointed when I show you my King of Spades. And I used to call it, and I probably will continue to call it, a little bit atypical, but this is just a King of Spades anthurium that's just got excellent, excellent traits. There is a lot of hype about the King of Spades anthurium, and for good reason. It's a complex hybrid from Indonesia that is characteristic of round, dark leaves, beautiful veins. This one is just like a step better than the average one, and I don't mean to sound snobbish. This plant just has the best of the best traits that you could ask for in a King of Spades. And I've done this before, but I'll do it again. I'll just grab my other King of Spades to try and show you the differences between this one and that one, because you may not be able to appreciate it without seeing a side by side. So here is my regular King of Spades anthurium. She's doing very well in her postpartum recovery. She's just produced over 100 seedlings for me, but here it is side by side with the atypical one. Now I do think the differences are subtle, and they may be hard to see just because of the maturity difference. But the lower one, the smaller one that I am showing you as my top favorite, it's darker, it's bluer, it's got a little tail, not just on this leaf, but every leaf has like a little curly tail. The edges are somewhat ruffled. They were much more ruffled when it was young, and it's sort of grown out of that. But I think the biggest difference for me is just the vein structure. Looking at them side by side, I don't think I have the words to articulate the differences, but I think you can see that there are differences there. Some might call this one more of like a spidery vein structure. I almost see it as almost like a lightning bolt kind of pattern. I don't know. It's very enigmatic. It's been very hard for me to put into words what I love so much about this plant. But I think all in all, this is just like the ideal anthurium. If you are interested in anthurium, you're probably looking for something that is dark, for something that is round, for something that's got striking veins. And I just think that this has it all. It is such a beautiful plant. I've always received great feedback when I've shown this on Facebook or Instagram, or even I think videos here. I don't know. I know it's not the biggest in the collection that I've shown you. It's definitely not the one I paid the most money for. I just really love this plant because it just is so special to me. The leaf is so thick, almost like cardboard. The plant is invincible. It hardly ever had to acclimate after import. It was fine. I've already been able to take and sell, I believe, 2 cuttings of it, and it's still a pretty small plant. And it never had a problem with me taking those cuttings. It's rooted really quickly and really well. I don't know, you guys. Look, this one, the veins are on this leaf. On all of them. I mean, look at the plant. I'm sure I can. Let me just try to hold it to where you can see all the leaves at once. That's beautiful. That's just so pretty. So I don't really think there's much more to say. It's got the #1 spot. And it's my video and they're my plants. So if you don't agree with me, that's fine. I say this is #1. This is the best anthurium in my collection. They're really all the best, truly. And so many of them deserve an honorable mention. I can see them in my frame. I've got an albo-variegated clarinervium right there. I've got this one, which is a Forgetii by Carla Blackier. I have so many that I love. If I turn here, you can see the one that's still pink is my FTG crystal by Carla. That was almost in my top 10. This one right here is my Anthurium Stingray clone, which should be in the top 10. And I don't know why, I just wasn't feeling it today. I've got a dark NSC Forgetii that I'm obsessed with. Above me is original Papillilanimum, one of the first Anthurium I bought, who's produced so many batches of seeds for me. Over here, you can't even see it at all. Anthurium Fairchild Crystallinum, such a beautiful plant that was on a wish list for the longest time. You guys, it is not an understatement and it is not cliche for me to tell you how hard it was to narrow it down to the top 10, but these are my top 10, and I really hope you enjoyed today's video. I really enjoyed making it for you, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye-bye.